Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So I am clearly in a different setting. I am outside because honestly I was cooped up inside all day at work and it's been a gorgeous day just all day, and yesterday as well I was cooped up all day and I just really didn't want to sit inside longer. So we're just gonna cross our fingers that there's not too much crazy wind and that the audio is okay for this, because it is gorgeous outside and I just wanted to be able to talk to you without sitting in my room for another hour. So today I wanted to do something called the Bookish Summoning Circle that I saw on my friend Molly's Bookstagram account. So she did a Bookish Summoning Circle on her Instagram, and it is basically 12 books that would summon you if you had them all together. So I just thought it would be fun to do that and just share some of my favorite books with you, some of the books that represent me, and books that you could summon me with if you were trying to do so. So without further ado, let's get into this book list. Alright, so overall, the books that I have in this stack kind of cover a couple of different broad themes or components that I look for in books, and I will just sort of list off some of the themes that I'm going to discuss so you have a general idea of the things I'm interested in. Powerful writing, writing that is commanding, that is different, unique, has something powerful behind it. Young female narrators, unreliable/unlikable narrators, short stories, feminism, women's issues in general, religion, psychoanalysis and psychological fiction, motherhood, morally gray women, experimental writing, deaf culture, and female sexuality. So there's a bird that is chirping incessantly, so I apologize for that, but generally those are some of the themes that really make up the things that I'm interested in reading and encompass the general themes of the books that I'm going to talk to you about. So the first two books in this stack are really here because I love the writing, and they both kind of deal with emotions and art, which I didn't really bring up in my list of like themes, but those are some themes that really hit home with me, and that if you're trying to summon me, those would be really important themes to capture in your book stack. So the first two books are Birds Art Life by Kyle McClear. This is a memoir that kind of discusses Kyle McClear's dealing with grief and her father being sick, how she discovered bird watching, and how all of those things kind of culminate into her art. There's art throughout this book, which is really, really beautiful and definitely makes the book aesthetically pleasing for sure. But the writing in this is so beautiful. It brings up so many topics of art, what it means to be an artist, and how we kind of acquire inspiration for art and things like that. So that is definitely a topic that is very much me. I'm someone who is really looking for books that are going to make me think, that are going to make me think about myself and my own life and how I can apply the knowledge and topics in the books to my own life. So that is something that's very important to me, and that is definitely represented in this book. So the first book in this stack would be Birds Art Life by Kyle McClear. In the same vein, we have Bluets by Maggie Nelson. This is a collection of, I wouldn't say a collection of essays necessarily, it is really just one essay, but I've clearly annotated the crap out of it. It is just fully annotated, but it basically covers Maggie Nelson's musings on the color blue and all of the connections she makes to the color blue. And there's things that are emotional, there are things that are very deeply touching, sad, raw. There's so many just incredible lines in this book that are just so deeply moving. So those kind of heavy-hitting emotional topics paired with the very beautiful writing style of this book really make it up my alley, and you can probably tell by how passionate I am about this book and how much I've talked about this book on my channel that it really is completely up my alley and one of my favorite books. I love how introspective it is. It makes me be introspective as well and consider the things that Maggie Nelson is talking about. It's just a beautiful book overall and definitely fits into my style of books. Quality literature, beautiful writing, topics that really make you think. That's my thing. So Bluets by Maggie Nelson, second book in my summoning circle. I say circle as if I'm laying these out in a circle. It's a summoning stack, but the name of the trend is Summoning Circle. So technicalities. All right, moving right along, we have two books that are sort of in a psychological thriller horror category, but have a lot of really, really fascinating topics as well. That's something that I would say is really important to me with literature, is that nothing is one-dimensional. Nothing is just as it is on the surface. There's always something brewing underneath. There's always something to consider. So the first one is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. We all know this is one of my favorite books of all time. I love this book so much. It is a terrifying book. It's masterfully put together. There are so many twists and turns that I never saw coming the first time. It gets better upon reread. It's just overall an incredible, incredible book. There are so many conversations that Jake and his girlfriend have that are really, really interesting and thought-provoking and kind of make you consider your own relationships and how you approach love, and if you stay in relationships based on the feeling that you should, which is just a really interesting thing to kind of think about and examine in yourself and your past. I definitely have had to examine that with past relationships of mine, so it is something that I think about a lot, and there's just, like I said, so many topics in this book that are beyond the thriller aspect of it. Yeah, a book that I can talk about with people and have in-depth conversations. That's a big win for me. So I'm Thinking of Ending Things is the third book in my summoning circle. So next up we have All's Well by Mona Awad. This follows a woman named Miranda who is living a nightmare. She used to be an actress, a theater performer for Shakespeare plays, and she was injured during a play and ended up teaching at a college instead of continuing because she was in so much pain. She basically is in this chronic pain that no one can really diagnose or tell her why she's still in pain. No one can fix it, no matter how many doctors she goes to. So it is a very twisty, weird kind of book because she is on drugs for most of it, prescription medication for most of the book, so you really don't know if she's reliable, bringing it back to the unreliable narrator thing. But yeah, there's a lot going on in this book. It's very thrilling, it is very twisty and turny, but what really struck me the most about this is the representation of chronic pain and the way that it talks about chronic pain being dismissed, which ties into my interest in women's issues because I feel like this is something that happens a lot to women specifically. But either way, that is something that I am very interested in as well, representation of chronic pain. So overall, this was just such a relatable book in that aspect, but a really, really fascinating book, a book that I think about all the time. This is obviously one of my favorite books, but it does represent some subjects that I'm really interested in, and I love it so much. So that is the fourth book in my summoning circle. Pivoting to another topic that I'm really, really interested in, I have True Biz by Sarah Novick. So this is a discussion of deaf culture, and it follows a couple of kids and a headmistress of a school for the deaf, and talks about the social challenges and the political challenges and things that face people in the deaf community, as well as kind of showing off the richness of the capital D deaf community and culture and heritage and stories and all of these beautiful things that surround deafness and sign language. I've been interested in sign language and deaf culture since I was very young. I was taking sign language as a second language while I was being homeschooled, and I kind of brought that up through college. Unfortunately, I've lost a little bit of my fluency. I was never 100% fluent, but I definitely had some really good conversation skills in ASL, and I kind of have lost touch with that a little bit, and this is really inspiring me to continue and relearn a lot of the signs and practice conversation, etc., and try to be more of a part of the deaf community. Not only is it educational, but it's fun, it's a coming-of-age story, it's true to the teenage experience regardless if you're deaf or not, but it does highlight a lot of the specific issues and specific joys of the deaf community. There are these drawings throughout that show signs and kind of give background context on different topics that are being discussed. So overall, it's just a really informative, fun book, and I loved it so much. And this is kind of a part of myself that I don't talk about a ton because I don't think that I'm really qualified to talk about it a ton. I don't have deaf friends really. I'm not like super a part of the community anymore, even though I was at one time. So this is just kind of re-inspiring me and re-motivating me to continue learning about the deaf community and deaf culture and try to jump back into it. So this is definitely representative of a passion of mine and an interest of mine and something that I think is important to learn about. So This is the 5th book in my summoning circle. Next up is a book that I absolutely adored. It was my 2nd favorite book of the year last year. And that book is Stay With Me by Ayobami Adebayo. So this book follows a woman in Nigeria. Her name is Yehide, I believe. And she is struggling to get pregnant, and her mother-in-law basically says that if she can't have a child, she is going to bring a new woman into the household, and the husband is going to have a child through her instead of Yehide. So it is a kind of upsetting premise, to be honest, but this book covers so much more than that. It is very much rooted in the Nigerian culture and customs, and really discusses motherhood, the desire to be a mother. It kind of gives a picture of the positives and negatives of motherhood. It's a beautifully written book, and it does encompass a theme that I have really been diving into over the past 2 years, and that is motherhood, the issues surrounding motherhood, the desire to be a mother, etc. That is one of the biggest goals of mine in my life, is to be a mom. So this definitely represents a huge aspect of my interests in life and my interests in literature specifically. And that is my 6th book in my summoning circle. So next up is a very weird book that I've talked about a lot, but it really does touch on subjects of female sexuality, psychoanalysis, psychological fiction, creative writing, unreliable/unlikable young female narrators, just very strange fiction in general. That's something I'm really interested in. And that, of course, is Hysteria by Jessica Gross. I've talked about this a lot. It follows an unnamed woman who is just very intoxicated over like a 24-hour period, and she goes to a bar and she thinks that she sees Sigmund Freud, and it just sort of explores her childhood. It sort of psychoanalyzes her the way that Freud was. It inspires the reader to psychoanalyze her. So it definitely fits into an aspect of literature that I'm really interested in. It doesn't shy away from representing female sexuality in a very bold and raw way. It also shamelessly portrays our narrator as kind of gross and strange, but it also makes her seem very much human and like a real person who's going through real issues. So it's an incredible book. This is a book that is not only one of my favorites, it's a book that I recommend to a lot of people because I think the topics are so bold and strong, and it's very much representative of a subgenre of books that I talk about all the time, that I post about all the time, and that I love. So that is the sad girl book, basically, but it's a favorite of mine. So next up, we have another book narrated by a young woman, and it is Magma by Þóra Hjörleifsdóttir. This is an Icelandic translated book, and it follows a young woman named Lilia who is in love with a very toxic man, and it just explores the dynamic of their relationship, how it falls apart, the way that Lilia talks to herself about the relationship. It is a bit of a traumatic book. It did upset me quite a bit at times, but it's poignant, it's intense, it's painful, and it does fit into some of the themes I discussed. Obviously, a young female narrator, women's issues, etc., but it's also just a very powerful book that hit home a little bit for me, and it's just something that I will probably read again and again and again because it's just so powerful. Like I said, powerful writing too. I look for that. I look for something that's going to move me, that's going to make me feel things. And honestly, I don't cry very much at books. I don't get worked up very much at a lot of books. These two definitely made me get very worked up. I cried at this one, honestly. So yeah, that's the kind of book I look for as well. Something that is going to make me feel something very moving. And a lot of the times this is in the context of women's issues. Obviously, I'm in no way saying that women are the only people who deal with these kind of situations, who deal with domestic violence, who deal with abuse. But that's the sort of subgenre that I have read a lot more of, and that's what Magma is talking about. So that's my reasoning for that, and that is the 8th book in my summoning circle. Alright, so of course I have to talk about this briefly. It is The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. This is my favorite book. I put it in here because it's my favorite book. It is not the pinnacle of quality literature, but I do think it's really well written. I think it's funny. I think that the way that the teenagers talk to each other is hilarious, and there are a lot of quotes in here that are genuinely moving to me. There are quotes in here that are so funny and things that I can just repeat all day long because they are so iconic. So this is really in there for the sake of my favorite book ever, and if you're going to summon me, you have to have this book because, oh my gosh, I have annotated the hell out of this book. I've read it so many times, and you can't have a summoning circle to summon me without this book. So now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the final 3 books. So these kind of all center around a similar theme, which is the theme of religion, exploring getting away from religion, the devastating effects of religion, kind of coping with that. So these books are about Christianity/Catholicism specifically, and they do at times paint religion in a negative light, but they kind of seek to show realistic examples of how religion plays with other aspects of a person's life and how religion could be detrimental to someone, especially someone who is young and impressionable. So the first book in this section is The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. So this one covers quite a few different topics. It is a book about a young woman named Ziamara. It is written in poetry, it's written in verse, which also brings in the, interesting creative kind of writing aspect that I often look for in books. She's a strong, independent young woman, and she talks a lot about dealing with boys and men and the way that men just take advantage of her, and she feels like her body doesn't belong to her because of the way that men look at her and treat her. But it also focuses a lot on Catholicism and the way that she feels kind of trapped and shut in by her family's religion. There's a lot of discussions in this of purity culture and how religion and the church kind of dictate what a girl can look like, can act like in terms of her sexuality, her own identity, etc. So it covers a lot of really serious topics in a really, really beautifully done way. Like I said, it is YA, but it doesn't feel juvenile. It covers some real life issues that pertain to teenagers and beyond. Honestly, I related to this even though I read it when I was not a teenager anymore. But it is just an overall incredible book, and that is the 10th book in my summoning circle. So the next one could be kind of considered YA as well, but it is Blankets by Craig Thompson. It is a massive graphic novel. This is what the art style looks like, so it's all black and white. So this book focuses on Craig Thompson's upbringing within the church and how it shaped his view of his identity, his sexuality, what he was and wasn't allowed to feel and do. And he meets a young woman and they kind of have an exploration and a discussion together about their sexuality, and that relationship just sends him down this path of self-discovery and realizing some things about his religion and his church. There's a lot of discussion of shame within the church surrounding sexuality and purity. The artwork is beautiful, the writing is beautiful, it tells a very, very interesting and important story. And I love that book so much. I do have some personal experience with that kind of topic, especially as a teenager, and sort of having to come to terms with my own feelings and how religion was going to fit in with the rest of my personality or not fit in, etc. So yeah, maybe not a book for everyone, but if you're trying to summon me, this is a very formative book, and it helped me through a time when I was really doing my own self-discovery. So Blankets is the 11th book in my summoning circle. So the final book in this stack is a book that really brings in a lot of topics. It is a glowing example of intersectionality, and it also ties in my love of short story collections, and that is The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Disha Filia. So this is a collection of stories focusing primarily on women characters, but they all relate to the church, the experience of being a woman within the church, coming to terms with religion, finding or losing religion, and they also deal with the experience of being Black and being a woman within the church. So like I said, a really good example of intersectionality. There are a lot of really important topics being discussed in this book, but they're tied in seamlessly. I read this in a day because the stories are just so captivating. I was drawn in. I did not want to put this book down, and it is just such an incredible book. It is really a great example of a lot of the topics that I am really interested in, and this is a favorite of mine. So that is the final book in my summoning circle. So those are all of the books in my summoning circle / stack, whatever you want to call it. Like I said, I will link the inspiration for this in the description from my friend Molly. I hope that through this stack you kind of get an idea of some of my favorite books, some topics that interest me, some things in literature and in life that are really important to me. I would love to see your summoning circles as well. If you end up taking a photo of your summoning stack / circle, please tag me on Instagram. My Instagram is Pages in Perpetuity, so please tag me. My Instagram's linked below as well. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.